Tell me about it. Tell me how it feels when you fight from the womb to delight and delight in a brightly lit room. And tell me how it feels when your mother baked cakes, all the butter and sugar and love that it takes. And tell me how it feels when you play on the swings, when you blow out the candles and everyone sings. And tell me how it feels on your first day at school, when your mum cut your fringe and your mittens were cool. And tell me how it feels when you run on the sand with your bucket and spade and your dad holding hands. And tell me how it feels when your dad moved away to a ready-made family. And what did he say? Tell me about it. Tell me how it feels when you score and you're proud and you think it's all over, but disallowed. And tell me how it feels when you start to grow breasts. When Mother Nature writes woman across a girl's chest. And tell me how it feels when you walk down the aisle with your father in tears as your stepmother smiles. And tell me how it feels when you look in his eyes and when you know that he knows that you know it's lies. And tell me how it feels when a boy racer crashes, when mum has to scatter her boy's wasted ashes. And tell me how it feels when the needle goes in. When the bass, 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 when the bass line kicks in. Tell me about it. Tell me how it feels when there is no blue line on the pregnancy test for the 17th time. Tell me how it feels when that splits up your marriage and then you get pregnant and then you miscarriage. And tell me how it feels to be judged by your race when your kids have to watch as they poof in your face. And tell me how it feels to be kicked from beneath when you're spitting out blood, snot and fury and teeth. And tell me how it feels when you mark out the line that enough is enough is enough, it's my time. And tell me how it feels to fight back from bereavements and use it as fuel for a life of achievement. Tell me about it. Tell me how it feels when you're crossing the line in a personal best and a world record time. And tell me how it feels to defy your oppressors, to look back with pride at a life of successes. And tell me how it feels when you've shattered the odds, when you've thrown off their shackles and danced with the gods. And tell me how it feels when you're slamming it, do you feel holes in their souls? Do they shout hallelujah? And tell me how it feels to slam all of the doom and the gloom from a room and commune us as humans. And tell me how it feels to deliver a line that everyone hangs on. How words can stop time. And tell me how it feels when you finish and then people laughing and crying and the judge holds up 6.4. Slam poetry. Tell me about it. Stop all the clocks. Thank you. So that poem was a challenge to my fellow poets really on a slam to dig deep and tell me the stories that really matter, that really connect. And that's what I try and do in a lot of my writing. I'm going to try and tell a couple of those stories now. Some of them work with silence. It's quite hard with it's perhaps noisier for me than it is for you guys. It's quite hard with these guys, but let's see how we go on. This was the sort of breakthrough poem from me about 4 or 5 years ago. It's a poem in the words of a young girl. She's 16, 17. She's the girl outside the off licence with the lads and with her mates, and she finds herself with a baby. Now, it's not every young woman's story. It's this young woman's story. She hasn't got fancy words to tell it. So this poem tries to take its power and its poignancy, if it achieves that, from her limited vocab and inarticulacy. It's a poem called A Girl Like You Know. When I met him and that, I just liked him and that. There was something about him, you know. We was all a bit pissed-like and we just sort of kissed-like. Ended up round the back like, you know. Then later in that, when I found out and that, I was like, fucking hell, like, you know. And I told him and that, and I showed him and that, and it just did his head in, you know. My mum's like, no way, like, and then she was okay, like, she's been dead good now, like, you know. I'm like, are you moving in like to help with his kid like? And he's like, whatever, you know. So we got our own flat like, but the area's crap like, and we need loads of stuff like, you know. Then I had Kyle like, and now for a while like I've felt a bit shit like, you know. And it hits me in that. And it's kicked me in that. But I love him in that. Like, you know. Sometimes I think like I've ruined my life, like. And I'm like, what life? You know? Thank you. Cheers. Did you hear that? Did that come across? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stay on that sort of mood and that sort of storytelling thing, if you bear with me for one more. A few years ago we did a show called Love vs Lust, and we did 7 nights around the Northwest, and we went into Style Women's Prison, which was just the best gig ever. It's fantastic, I'll tell you about it later. But before we went in, I found myself talking to the prisons correspondent for The Guardian, a guy called Eric Allinson, who spent time in prison himself. He used to make his own gyros. And we were talking about prisons and women's prisons here, and he'd not long been into Style, and Style is, you know, quite notorious in these parts for suicide and self-harm and you know, really heavy things like that. And he was telling me how levels of self-harm and suicide in women's prisons peak around Mother's Day. And that really got me thinking as to why Mother's Day would be an upsetting time for women in prison for all sorts of reasons. So this poem is about as deep and dark as my writing goes, and it's a poem called Mother's Day. A pain that wakes me every day, waving as they walk away. Things I always meant to say, with love, on Mother's Day. Body clock, alarm bells sound. I'm sorry, ma'am, I've let you down. Kids cry, I'm not around. With love, on Mother's Day. The card awaited. Doesn't come. Late addressed to world's best mum. Tears make homemade colours run. With love, on Mother's Day. The baby who I've never seen. Forms I signed age 17. Tortured by what could have been. With love, on Mother's Day. The man who left without a care. The scan that said there's nothing there. The chance to comb a daughter's hair. With love, on Mother's Day. The mother who I never knew. Nursery empty. Painted blue. Where the fucking hell were you? With love, on Mother's Day. Mother Nature's